Joshua 4:18 says, "And when the priests bearing the ark of the covenant," notice it's back to covenant, "of the Lord came up from the midst of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet were lifted up," that's neat, "on dry ground, the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks as before." So again, this river, according to chapter 3, verse 15, 3 verse 15, this river is at flood stage level. So it's overflowed all of its banks. I mean, it's a lot higher than normal, and that's kind of the point. God is one, he's showing us that it is futile to try to explain this away. This is a full-blown miracle that God has done. But it's also showing us that God has led his people to an even greater obstacle, that they had to have even greater faith in God. Are they going to walk with him? Are they going to trust him? And we see in chapter 3 and verse 4, yes, they did. They trusted God. They believed that God was going to do what he said he was going to do. And so in Joshua 4:18, after Joshua commanded the priests from God's command, Joshua now gives that command to the priests, come out of the midst of the Jordan. Verse 18 here, "When the priest bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord came up from the midst of the Jordan, and the soles of the priest's feet were lifted up," it's as if they were lifted up, they were carried out on dry ground, "the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks as before." Now, this right here on dry ground, what they were standing on was dry ground. We've already seen that in chapter 3 and throughout chapter 4. But what this is talking about is when their feet were now lifted up on dry ground, as in the ground that's not normally covered in water. So it is normally dry ground. Even though it's overflowed at this point, it's still dry ground because the river, even overflowed, is not touching it. That's the ground that the priests came upon. And as soon as they fully came out of the overflowed area of the river, then the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks as before. And so as soon as the priests left the river from Adam, it was no longer heaped. It fell. It fell, and it flowed all the way down to the Dead Sea. And so all of Israel, including pagan cities and nations and people, they were able to see all of this take place. They saw the water heaped up, and then they saw it just collapse and fall all the way back down and flood all the way back down, flow all the way back down to the Dead Sea. And so this is what's happening in Joshua chapter 4, verse 18. "When the priests bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord came up from the midst of the Jordan, and the soles of the priest's feet were lifted up on dry ground, the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks as before." Notice that God waited perfectly for the priests to leave the Jordan River. He waited until everything was accomplished before he crashed this water down. Joshua 4:18.